Most of the time, evil doesn't arrive making noise. It arrives disguised as routine. An ordinary night, a regular Saturday, an apartment building like thousands of others in São Paulo, considered the most influential city in Brazil. Inside it, families having dinner, televisions on, children sleeping, until, at some point that night, something breaks that pattern. It's not a scream, it's not a cry for help, it's an impact, a loud, dry sound, heavy, irreversible. The doorman stands up, walks toward the outside area, and then sees what no one should ever see, a child lying on the ground. That moment divides time in two. The before, when everything seemed normal, and the after, when nothing would ever make sense again. Minutes later, the first reports begin to spread. The first version, the first attempt at an explanation. Someone entered the apartment. It was an intruder. It was a stranger. But while the entire country tried to understand who could have done this, the police began asking a different question. Did anyone really enter that apartment? Because, according to the investigation, the signs did not point outward. They pointed inward. Nearly 2 decades have passed, and even today, this case remains one of the most disturbing in Brazilian criminal history. Not only because of what happened to a 5-year-old girl, but because of what forensic investigators say they uncovered about what happened before the fall. Before we talk about what happened that night, it's important to understand who the people in this story are, because this case does not involve strangers. It involves a family. Isabella de Oliveira Nardoni was 5 years old. She was the daughter of Alexander Nardoni, but she did not live with him. Isabella lived with her mother, Ana Carolina Oliveira, and spent some weekends at her father's home. Alexander Nardoni was Isabella's father. He lived in this building, Edifício London, in the northern area of São Paulo. Ana Carolina Jatoba was Alexandre's wife and Isabella's stepmother. She lived in the apartment with him. The couple had 2 young children together, Isabella's half-sibling. And there is one more person who becomes crucial from the very beginning. The building's doorman, Valdomiro da Silva Veloso. These are the central figures in this story, because, within a few minutes, all of them would be connected to what would become one of the most shocking and terrifying criminal cases in Brazil's history. Isabella de Oliveira Nardoni was 5 years old. On the night of March 29, 2008, she was at the building where her father lived, Edifício London, located in the Vila Guilherme district in northern São Paulo. That Saturday, Isabella had spent the day with her father's family, Later, Alexandre Nardoni, Ana Carolina Jatoba, and their 2 young children went out together. Hours before the incident, they had been at a supermarket. Just before midnight, the family's car enters the building's garage. The doorman watches them arrive. Inside the vehicle were Alexander, Ana Carolina, Isabella, and the 2 younger children. According to the initial version given, Isabella was asleep. Alexander allegedly carried her up to the apartment, placed her in bed, and then went back down to get the other children. When he returned, according to this first account, he noticed something strange. A protective screen on one of the windows appeared damaged. At that moment he claimed he realized Isabella was no longer in the bedroom. Then came the sound, a strong impact. The doorman hears it, runs outside, and finds Isabella lying on the ground outside the building. Emergency services are called. The police are notified. Panic sets in. Almost immediately, an explanation appears. Someone had broken into the apartment and thrown the child out the window. The word intruder spreads. At that moment, Brazil believed it was facing another brutal crime committed by an unknown person, but the investigation was only beginning. From the very first moments, police begin working with one basic question. Does the scene confirm the story being told? Investigators examine the apartment, the garage, common areas, and all access points. And as the days pass, the intruder theory begins to weaken. According to reports from the time, no signs consistent with a violent break-in were found, such as forced doors or suspicious movement inside the building. The doorman's testimony gains importance. He stated that he did not see any unfamiliar person entering or leaving the building during the critical time window. Another element becomes central: the protective screen. Police maintain that it showed signs of being cut, not accidentally torn. This raises a serious suspicion that the screen may have been intentionally damaged to simulate a break-in. At the same time, investigators reconstruct the family's entire routine that day. Security camera footage from a supermarket is analyzed. It shows Isabella with her father, stepmother, and siblings, hours before the tragedy. These images help police build a timeline. What time they left the supermarket, how long it took them to reach the building, who went upstairs first, who stayed with which children, how long each person was outside the apartment. Every minute becomes a puzzle piece. Reports also begin to mention blood traces and other signs inside the apartment and the family car, raising suspicion that Isabella may already have been injured before the fall. Little by little, the narrative changes. The focus stops being who came in and becomes what happened inside. This case involves a child, and because of that, there is a risk of content restriction here on YouTube, but I am taking that risk to bring you quality investigative content. So if you appreciate that, subscribe to the channel and leave a like to support this work. When the initial shock fades, the most silent and most decisive work begins. Forensic analysis. While the country debated versions, experts examined the apartment as if every centimeter were a sentence waiting to be read. Nothing was ordinary. Nothing was just a detail. Everything could confirm or destroy. A story. The guiding question was simple. Could this really have been the work of an intruder? And according to the forensic reports presented in court, the scene answered no. Experts started with the apartment itself. Front door, locks, bedrooms, windows, possible routes. The technical conclusion was clear. There were no signs consistent with a violent invasion. The apartment did not look like the scene of a sudden external attack. It looked controlled. Attention then turns to the protective window screen. Under forensic lighting, it did not look ripped. According to experts, Itzo Wade Kutz's localized cuts, compatible with a tool. To investigators, this did not resemble the action of someone desperately trying to escape. It looked like someone stopped, held, and cut. A gesture incompatible with panic, compatible with intent. Experts also examined the shirt Alexander was wearing that night. This became one of the most symbolic moments in the case. According to forensic analysis, marks were found on the shirt consistent with contact with the protective screen. Impressions. As if the fabric had been pressed against the net, as if a body had leaned there. The scene began to take shape. Someone leaning, someone supporting themselves, someone in that exact position. Another central point was blood evidence. Reports during the investigation stated that blood traces were found inside the apartment and in the family's car, and forensic interpretation was clear. This blood could not be explained only by the fall. It indicated Isabella had been injured before. That changes everything. Because if there was blood before the fall, then there was a before. Something happened inside that apartment. At that point, the fall stopped being seen as the beginning. It became a way to conceal what had already happened. The forensic medical examination then focused on Isabella's body, and the conclusions presented were shocking. According to the reports, Isabella showed signs consistent with mechanical asphyxia, strangulation. This means she was deprived of air before the fall. There was restraint, there was physical contact, there was direct violence, and this destroys the narrative of a sudden window attack. But perhaps the hardest fact to process is this. According to the forensic reconstruction, Isabella was not dead when she was taken to the window. Experts stated she was thrown while still alive. In this scenario, the fall was not the initial attack. It was the final blow. When all the elements were brought together, a picture formed. Absence of invasion signs, cuts in the screen marks on the father's shirt. Blood evidence, indicating prior injury. Forensic conclusion of asphyxia dynamics incompatible with outside action. These were not assumptions. They were physical traces. At this point, a story stops being a mystery and becomes something far more disturbing. Because, according to forensics, Isabella was injured. Isabella was strangled. Isabella was still alive. And then she was thrown. And the fall was not the beginning. It was the end. Based on all these elements, Police concluded the investigation, identifying Alexander Nardoni and Ana Carolina Jatoba as responsible for the crime. This horrified Brazil. How is such cruelty possible? How can someone do this to a child, and worse, to their own daughter? Before we talk about the trial, I want to know your opinion. Do you think this case deserved life imprisonment or the death penalty? Tell me in the comments. In my opinion, they deserved life imprisonment. But now, you will see how the Brazilian justice system works. With the investigation concluded, the case goes to trial. What was once a police drama becomes one of the most followed trials in Brazilian history. 4 days, the country watches as everything forensic experts found is presented. Reports, photos, reconstructions, simulations, technical testimonies. The prosecution argues that Isabella was assaulted before the fall, that the screen was cut to simulate a break-in, and that there was an attempt to mislead investigators. The defense contests. Versions clash. But in the end, jurors must answer one question. What best explains the evidence? And the jury answers. Alexander Nardoni and Ana Carolina Jatoba are found guilty of qualified homicide and procedural fraud related to Isabella's death. The sentence is read on March 27, 2010. Alexander Nardoni is sentenced to 31 years, 1 month, and 10 days in prison. Ana Carolina Jatoba is sentenced to 26 years and 8 months in prison. Due to the severity of the crime, both sentences initially had to be served in closed prison regime. Over the following years, both served part of their sentences, even in severe crimes involving children. Brazilian law allows sentence progression for inmates who meet legal requirements, such as time served and good behavior. In 2023, Ana Carolina Jatoba was granted open regime progression and released to serve the remainder of her sentence under legal conditions. In 2024, Alexander Nardoni also received open regime progression and was released under judicial supervision. Both progressions were granted based on Brazilian criminal law requirements. The Isabella Nardoni case is not remembered only for the brutality of that night. It is remembered for the outrage. Outrage at what, according to forensics, happened inside that apartment. Outrage at realizing the original story did not hold. Outrage at seeing a crime involving a child shock an entire country. For years, Isabella's name became a symbol of indignation, pain, and demands for justice. But time passed. Appeals moved forward. Sentences were served. And within what Brazilian law allows, both convicted individuals are now free. For many people, that opened a new wound, because it is not easy to accept that a case that marked a generation, that ended the life of a 5-year-old, is now officially closed in the prison system. That raises a question that still hurts. What is justice in a case like this? Maybe that is why, almost 20 years later, this case still hasn't gone silent. It lives on in collective memory, in debates, in outrage, and in the feeling that some stories never reach a satisfying ending. And now, I want to hear from you. Which of these cases should we cover next? The Susanne von Richthofen case, the teenager who killed her parents, or the Elisa Samudio case, the woman murdered in a crime that shocked Brazilian sports right? In the comments, which case you want to see next? And if you want to keep following real stories that marked Brazil and the world, subscribe to the channel. Because some stories are not meant to be forgotten. They exist to be remembered. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video.